What's going on, guys, and welcome back to yet another meta deck report for the month of May. We're going to cover the best competitive decks to be using right now in Marvel Snap. Snap is in a fantastic place as far as the meta goes. There's a wide variety of decks that you could be playing across like a good amount of archetypes. And this is largely thanks to the weekly buffs and nerfs that Second Dinner's doing. They're killing it, and I hope they keep doing it because it's keeping the meta fresh. Now, I still think the meta's pretty fluid, but we're going to start with the best of the best, the tip of the spear. Tier 1 decks. These are going to be the best in terms of win rate and cube rate, and they're just stomping the ladder at the moment. Now, right now in May, the #1 deck has got to be the Big Stat Discount. The only stats, there's a lot of names floating around, and essentially we've got a Stature, Black Bolt, Miles Morales, and Move card deck with new cards like Jeff and Nebula. This deck is just freaking great in terms of value. All of the power numbers are typically below Shang-Chi. You've got great cards like Darkhawk. You have discounts through Stature and Miles. Polaris to go ahead and help against Galactus. You have Jeff to enable Move, Korg to enable Darkhawk, and Zabu for the discounts as well, and tie it all together with the massive Enchantress buff. This currently has the highest win rate by a mile, and this is not the only version. There are several versions using the 4 main cards of the Darkhawk, Miles, and Stature. Guys, I kid you not, this deck, I've played a lot of it. Just the stats, the consistency, it's so damn good. A lot of the cards can't be Shang-Chi, so if you have the cards, I definitely encourage you to try it out. It just rips on the ladder. Now, of course, next up for our Tier 1 deck is Sera Control, which has been at top of the meta now for quite a while. But obviously, guys, Sera Darkhawk Control is really reigning king as far as Sera Control decks go. You have a counter and an answer for just about everything, right? Nebula, Zoo decks, Zero decks, Killmonger is going to take care of those. Polaris is going to help you against those Galactus decks. You've got Shang-Chi for the big power cards, and of course, Enchantress for all those ongoing decks. And then it's all about a big miracle finish. Sentinel's going to give you a nice steady curve, and even with the Lizard nerf, you have Enchantress there to even everything out, and Nova to give everything an extra boost of power. Now, of course, the other version of the deck is going to utilize the newest Season Pass card outside of Nebula in Hitmonkey. A little bit more explosive than the other Sera Control deck. However, the combination of Hitmonkey, Mysterio, and Bishop all together just screams synergy, and you have not only a way to push out power, but also obviously a way to counter as well. Next up, as you guys know, is my favorite deck, Rocks and Hawks. This deck I've played probably 20 times more than any other deck, simply because of all of the win conditions and cards that you can slot out. Now, a common theme, guys, Darkhawk is obviously in all of these decks. He's very solid. He has a lot of locations that work for him. He counters Thanos all by himself. Now, most of you guys are aware I've got a complete A to Z guide detailing everything you could possibly need to know about this deck. So if you want to dive in and try Rocks and Hawks, if you have the cards, I recommend going to check that out. It's awesome to see Rocks and Hawks still in a very good place, even after Enchantress just getting super buffed, right? But with Cosmo and Agent Coulson providing enough randomness, definitely the deck is still very solid to climb, and I use it all the time. Now, next up, we have our Disrupt Nebula Double Up deck. And right now, double decks are really strong. Simply getting multiple She-Hulks is just insane as far as a last turn finish. Moon Girl always keeps your opponent on their toes as they don't know what you copied. And you have lots of ways to clog their side via Green Goblin and to capitalize on that with Mojo. Now, this deck is going to utilize Hitmonkey and Nebula's core power, multiple clones of these, as well as the Sunspot and She-Hulk combination. Yeah, in my opinion, I think this is easily the best Nebula deck. You're combining all these things that are doing really well at the moment. Only with having Nebula out for a week, people are just playing this all over the ladder. Truly, guys, I can't for the life of me figure out why people aren't playing discard. The win rate is through the roof, and this is going back to like January. I'm going to make some in-depth guides about it. I've got some decks that I've been using a ton. But if you want a solid performer, it's definitely this deck. Now, what's so cool about Nebula discard, or just discard in general, is the main mold doesn't change all that much. Storm and Nebula have one of the best synergies we've seen in a while, and Storm was already being ran in discard decks, so naturally Nebula is going to fit into the discard mold. Now, you might notice Jeff is also in a lot of decks, and you can always swap him out for, something like Nightcrawler, Lizard, or in this deck's case, you could do another discard option. You have ways to build up power with Wolverine, Swarm, and Colleen Wing. You can put an impressive amount of power with those cards combined with Morbius, and now Nebula on top of that. Obviously, Dracula's there to just control his own lane, and then MODOK is putting out 8 power, building up Apocalypse, and then on the last turn of the game, you always have America Chavez to either play or have Dracula absorb the power. Now, by now, guys, you can't be a stranger to Wave 5 decks. Playing Wave on turn 5 and being able to play a lot of cards at once where your opponent is going to be limited. Now, She-Hulk is always the staple in these decks, and Magneto is very strong right now because he can control and move those Darkhawks and Miles Morales that we're seeing creep up everywhere. Dr. Doom, time and time again, is going to be the core central part of this deck, as he's continuing to be one of the best value cards in the game. Arrow is still great at disruption. White Queen is an amazing intel card. We have Scorpion and Lizard for priority. If you're looking for just a good cards deck, this is definitely one that can make a dependable climb up to infinite. However, at the same time, the other version of the deck, Deathwave, is still out and around. It's been a meta option since December. Really before that, even since the beta. The reason why this deck is doing so well at the moment is its consistent power. But at the same time, you also have Killmonger to handle the plethora of Nebulas out there. Again, it can also take care of a bunch of one-cost drops that people are just slotting in the deck, like Titania, Zero, and Ebony Maw in those Sandman decks. These are just staple classic favorites, and again, if you don't want to get too complicated, learn these decks and enjoy the climb. Now, we have 2 more decks in Tier 1, and I'm going to be brief here, guys. This is the Galactus deck, and not much has changed here, right? Simply put, the reason this is doing so well is outside of all the Galactus options, you also have kind of an alternate win condition that's still very strong. You have Destroyer for obviously a big play card, but also you've got Yondu. And if Yondu snipes a big power card, then your Null is going to be great. Doc Ock just disrupts so many different combos and situations for your opponent. You have Spider-Man for the control option. All this is outside of Galactus. And then, of course, if you get Galactus, well, it's usually GG if your opponent's not ready. Now, I've got to say, I'm thrilled to see Control doing so well right now in the meta. This deck in particular, I might do a full in-depth guide on, but Guardians of Control is an awesome deck with a bunch of plug-and-play opportunities. Magneto doesn't have to be in the deck, but again, he's here to control those Darkhawks and all the powerful 4-cost cards. Now, outside Magneto, we have a lot of ways to capitalize on the Daredevil that we're looking to play. If you do play Nebula and Storm and you pull that off, typically you can snap. You're probably going to win the game if you got a good enough advantage. Lizard is in the deck, however, Jeff is a much better option. Jeff allows you to go into a flooded lane, move lanes. He can go into Professor X. We obviously have cards like Enchantress to handle all the ongoing meta at the moment. And then all these Guardians of the Galaxy can be played on top of Daredevil for a massive power swing. Really solid. A lot of plug-and-play options. You can do She-Hulk in the deck. You can mix and match a lot of different cards like Juggernaut, Negasonic. Love the deck. If you haven't tried it out, you got to give it a shot. All right, so that's going to do it for the Tier 1 decks. Let's go to Tier 2. Now, remember, guys, like paper-thin margins here. These Tier 2 decks can easily punch up to Tier 1. Usually something is holding them back, like RNG, overall consistency, but still, these decks can take you to infinite. Now, to kick off Tier 2, we start with Shuri, and Shuri could be in Tier 1, like I said, but right now, I do have her at the very top of Tier 2. This is going to be the new Premier Shuri deck that has a very high win rate, and it's pretty consistent. You have Vision for that movable power. You have Red Skull as a backup advantage. Kang the Conqueror is fantastic in this deck, as you can see what they're going to do after you play Shuri, allowing you to be mistake-free for the most part. Again, you can put in Black Bolt and Stature. Those cards are working in every deck at the moment. We have the She-Hulk and Sunspot combo, Zero and Titania as always, and then we have Cosmo for a pure tech option, and then combine all that with obviously Taskmaster. So really good version of the deck, but also we're seeing a return of Sauron. After the Shuri nerf, Sauron is finally finding a home, and we're going to be capitalizing on neutralizing these bad ongoing abilities. A lot of flexibility here as well if you do have Sauron as a card. Now, whoever told you Thanos is dead is a liar, guys. This deck is still definitely Tier 2. I mean, you just have big stat cards that can go wide and tall. Leech got a nerf, but he's still good on turn 6. You have great cards that can move with Vision. You have a lot of flexibility. Thanos is still very much alive, and if you're interested, this is the deck that I would play. Now, if you guys have been following the channel, you know that Silver Surfer has been a silent performer for a while now. We've had it on the meta deck report for the last couple of months, but it might be at the best state that it's ever been. However, we have 2 different styles today, a Sera Surfer one that you guys are used to, and then we have a Control Surfer. Now, mainly, guys, Killmonger is in a really good spot at the moment, as well as Goose and Jeff that all kind of gel with the deck. Control Surfer is a lot of fun of shutting down your opponent and boosting up high power stat lines. But I gotta say, the new Sera Surfer it feels great. We have Cosmo to help us out with a lot of on-reveal cards, Juggernaut to displace, and then Killmonger and Rogue together. I can't tell you guys how good they feel in the deck, and their stat lines you're going to be able to boost up and make up for the power. You have Storm, obviously, and you can even put Nebula in here. It's a little wonky with Killmonger, but obviously it still works. And then as the cherry on top, a lot of decks right now are dependent on locations, and this is great at closing down and then having Cosmo or other disruption cards like Rogue to mess up what they can play. So if you ever use Patriot by now to make your way up to Infinite, even a little bit in the ladder, or you even playing Marvel Snap, guys, Patriot is just such a solid stat line deck. You have something to handle everything out there. Yes, Enchantress is a bit more popular, but honestly, Cosmo's fine. Separate your ongoing cards. You have so many of them. As long as you get used to that, the pure stat lines of Shocker, Misty Knight, combined with Khazar, and the big cards of Abomination, Doctor Doom, and Ultron, you have an answer as a win condition for most things out there. And as always, Patriot can counter most of the strong decks at Tier 1. And now you have different flexible options like Super Scroll. You have obviously Surprise Patriot. There's so many different ways to play. But this is the true core reliable Patriot that some of the best players in the game depend on. Now, another deck that's a bit of a silent performer at the moment is Janejaw. In fact, after the Lockjaw nerf, I think the deck got even better with the way that Thor and the hammer work. Love Jubilee in the deck. There's some RNG involved, but it's a bit more dependable than it once was. The play pattern is pretty straightforward, so we're not going to spend much more time here, but if you're kind of struggling on what deck to play and you do enjoy the Lockjaw playstyle, then build up Janejaw and fire up some fun. Even after Sandman's nerf, it doesn't matter. You can still beat the decks that he was designed to beat. Now, of course, we have big power presence with Ebony Maw early. We have Jubilee for an always dependable option. But at the same time, we also have Jeff the Shark, who's not only good to play against Sandman, but if you're playing a Sandman deck, he's always clutch to have in your back pocket. Leader is a way to answer a lot of decks that you know what's coming on turn 6. We have Doctor Doom and Odin. We have Magneto. The deck's still very strong. And then, of course, Nebula coming out just made it even better as you can slot her where Sunspot is, and it's very high performing. Listen, Stature, Miles, those decks are fun. But I gotta say, Bounce Disrupt is still a very solid deck. It can struggle a little bit, and it is a bit tough to pilot. But man, is this deck just punishing to your opponents, and you'll frustrate the hell out of them. You can surprisingly get nice stats. Your opponents can't really stop you unless they're running Shadow King, and nobody's running Shadow King. Beast and Hitmonkey were just a match made in heaven. If you can drop Hitmonkey early, pick them back up, you're able to just get tremendous stats alongside Darkhawk. And then outside of all the combos, America Chavez, I don't know if there's a better deck for her at the moment, with Bass to avoid the 3-power drop, and then just having that dependable power. Super solid, and if you throw Falcon in, even crazier with the amount of disruptions you can pull off. Now, truly, I think Balance is probably like a tier 1 deck, no question, but in the right hands, it's not the easiest deck to pilot by any means, but if you've perfected it, you can slap anything out there. Now, with the recent buff to Shayna, we've got Evil Zoo. You guys probably know it as Dracula Dump. This is a bit of a different variation, but Dracula Dump or Zoo is just performing at a great level at the moment. There's a lot of dependability. Some great one-cost cards are continuing to come to Snap between Nebula, Titania, Ebony Maw. I've got a complete in-depth guide teaching you exactly how to pilot a deck just like this, so you guys can check that out in the top right-hand corner. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and end this thing with a little rapid-fire mode, show you guys a bunch of great decks that kind of just missed the cut. If you want these graphics, you can find them on my Twitter and Discord. I'll put that down in the description below. And these are all still very solid for a good climbing experience. Now, with the recent Luke Cage buff, I think Cerebro 2 might be at the best place that it's ever been. The win rate's surprisingly high, around 55%, and Cerebro 2 is going to have nice days ahead of it. Now, as for Cerebro 3, I think the best thing going for it is that people really never know that you're playing Cerebro 3 anymore. I mean, it kind of blends in with the other decks out there. It's much harder to pilot, in my opinion, and the win rate is kind of low because of that. Now, as for Iron Patriot, Patriot, essentially, guys, it's a Patriot and Iron Man deck. Super strong to go tall and avoid Shang-Chi, and really contest a lot of the competitive decks at the moment. If you want to find out everything about that deck as well, you can check the top right-hand corner above. Next up, we have the Move deck. Is Cloak and Dagger, and this is our Move deck in Tier 3. Now, this could be higher. It takes a lot of games to master it, though. That's why we have it this low. But if you dedicate yourself to it, you're going to be rewarded with a pretty solid experience. And next month is all about Move, and so, hey, you might as well get started early. Now, last, guys, but not least, we have our post-credit Miracle deck. And again, this is one that I think is going to skyrocket when High Evolutionary comes out, but this is the core build as of now. The deck is good, and it's pretty linear. It's very easy to play the deck. It's one that you can play when you're not really paying all that much attention. And with that, guys, here is all of the decks that we covered today from Tier 1 to Tier 3. Good God. It's a meta deck report for the month of May. I still think it's very fluid. We're getting weekly buffs and nerfs, so there's a lot of silent performers out there, if you will. If you're looking for the deck codes, the graphics, all that good stuff, maybe a more in-depth look into some of these decks, I'll pop those down in the description below. And if you find yourself coming back here and you want to support me as a creator, it means a lot if you just press the subscribe button down below as we're trying to make it to 100,000 subs by June. Appreciate you guys. Good luck out there. And as always, happy snapping.